College football fans, join in the discussion. Mark Rogers TV breaking down the BCS conferences. We're taking a look at 2012, the bowl results against each other, and the non-conference competition among the BCS leagues in the regular season, and also those games against top 25 opponents outside the BCS like Notre Dame, Boise State, and Northern Illinois. Of course, there are dominating efforts that need to be given credit and also some very bad losses. We know that on the field, in the rankings, in the standings, the wins and losses are all that count. But we want to get a good perspective on rating the conferences on fair, even ground. For example, Wisconsin, the 6th seed in the Big Ten. You know the situation with Ohio State and Penn State. Goes to the Rose Bowl, plays the Pac-12 champion Stanford. Plays them within one drive, 20-14, takes it down to the last 2 minutes of the game. Yes, Wisconsin loses. That's all that counts. The Pac-12 champion, Stanford, wins the Rose Bowl. But in rating the conferences, that has to be taken into consideration that the 6th place team in the Big Ten played within a touchdown of the number 1 seed in the Pac-12. So we continue with the Big 12. The Big 12 went 4-5. Let's run down the bowl games. Kansas State won the Big 12. They get the automatic qualifying to the BCS, and they get blasted by Oregon 35-17. If you saw that game, you know that K-State had a chance to stay in the game late in the second quarter, turned it over. Oregon turned it into a track meet and ran away with it again, 35-17. Oregon, one of the best teams in the country, no question, 11-1. Most people wanted to see them play Alabama in the championship game. But if you look at the best team that Oregon played, it was Stanford. They lost the game in overtime. Oregon's wins are not that impressive. Fresno State, Arizona, Washington, their best wins. USC was supposed to be really strong, but Oregon's best win turned out to be Oregon State, probably a fringe top 20, top 25 team. Kansas State's biggest win out of conference was against Miami. They killed the Canes like 50-9. Okay, dominance factor in this game for Oregon is 8 because they did dominate the game, and it was a very good win and a strong win against a top 12-15 team in Kansas State. We know that they were ranked much higher than that most of the season. Give them all the credit in the world for winning the Big 12, but legitimately, if you really look at the SEC and Ohio State and Notre Dame and some other leagues and who came out of the Pac-12 and Stanford, K-State was about the 12th to 15th best team in the country. Okay, Texas A&M and Oklahoma. A&M wins this one over Oklahoma 41-13. It was close at half. Then A&M put on the throttle and it was over. Johnny Manziel running wild, and Oklahoma with that big pass offense could do nothing in the second half. Bad loss for the Big 12 at the top with Kansas State getting blasted in the BCS and also Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. Again, 41-13. Dominance factor here is 7.5 because A&M comes in at 10-2. The huge win against Bama. We know A&M's really strong, so Oklahoma doesn't take much of a hit because it's certainly understandable, but this was supposed to be a close game. Again, A&M defeated Bama, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and La Tech. Their losses, certainly understandable. Florida and LSU, but they blasted Oklahoma 41-13. Oklahoma also losing their other big non-conference game at home against Notre Dame by 17. All right, Oklahoma State 58, Purdue 14. So you had two fairly evenly matched, on paper, evenly matched teams from two big conferences. Purdue 6-6, Oklahoma State 7-5. Oklahoma State makes the Big 12 look very good here, again winning 58-14. Purdue lost its coach. A lot of teams did in the bowl season, so no big deal there. Our dominance factor is 9. But take into consideration, Purdue at 6-6, really their two best efforts of the season were in losing to Ohio State in overtime and also losing to Notre Dame on the last play of the game at South Bend. They got killed the other 4 times in the Big Ten, so this was not one of the better teams in the Big Ten. Probably about the 8th best team in the Big Ten, taking on Oklahoma State, which was in that group of teams. If you look at the Big 12, after K-State and Oklahoma, there was West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Baylor. They all beat each other, and they were difficult to separate, so there was that 500 range of teams in the Big 12, and Oklahoma State among those teams, but win a big one for the Big 12 there, 58-14 over Purdue. But they took a downer non-conference in the regular season against Arizona, a similar team, but man, Oklahoma State got blasted 59-38 in that game. Okay, Texas with a big win for the Big 12 against Oregon State, a quality opponent, 31-27. Beavers come in at 9-3, a legitimate top 15 team at that point, move them into the top 25 range. And Oregon State had a fine season, defeating UCLA, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Their losses were two of them very close to Stanford by 4 and Washington by 3. They did get blasted by Oregon, but just about everybody else did as well. So good win for the Big 12 and Texas. Dominance factor here was 1.5. It was a seesaw game, and it was a very competitive game at the Alamo Bowl. Texas wins 31-27. Their big non-conference win during the regular season against Ole Miss, 66-31. The Rebs turned out to be a very good team. At the end of the season, Longhorns caught them early, 66-31. Texas Tech, Minnesota, very close football game. Minnesota looked like they had it locked away. They fumbled. They made some bad coaching decisions late in the game. Texas Tech took it over and won 34-31. Okay, this is not a big win for the Big 12. Minnesota's horrible. They went 2-6 in the Big 10, a down Big 10. They got killed by everybody in the Big 10, anybody decent in the Big 10. They did defeat Syracuse, who turned out to be the Big East co-champion. That a pretty good win for Minnesota. So Texas Tech wins at 34-31. They did what they had to do. They defeated no one out of conference during the regular season. Texas Tech never schedules anyone tough out of conference. So dominance factor here of 1 on the plus side for Texas Tech in the Big 12. Okay, West Virginia, of course, they collapsed late in the season. That included the bowl loss in New York City to Syracuse, 38-14. The 'Cuse comes in at 7-5, like a top 40 team. So not a real good showing for the Big 12 here, losing by 24 against a team that was 7-5 out of the worst BCS league. Dominance factor for Syracuse of 8, so that's a -8 for the Big 12. Again, the Big East co-champion, their big wins against Northwestern, or their Syracuse lost to Northwestern, and they got a big win against Louisville. I got my notes screwed up here. Syracuse lost to USC, Rutgers, and Cincinnati again. They lost to Northwestern as well. So Syracuse had a pretty tough schedule, and otherwise West Virginia defeated no one out of conference. All right, Big 12 loses to the Big 10 here, 17-16. You saw this game. Michigan State could do nothing on offense. TCU should have salted this one away, made some mistakes. Michigan State's defense is one of the best in the country. They pulled it out 17-16. So Michigan State comes in at 6-6 into this bowl game, but definitely much better than that. They lost at the wire against Ohio State, Northwestern, Michigan, Nebraska, and Iowa. That was a bad loss, but the other one's legitimate. Lost to Notre Dame as well. They defeated Boise State and Wisconsin. Michigan State, one of the top 30-35 teams in the country. So not a horrible loss for TCU, because we're talking about a 500 team in the Big 12. Dominance factor here for Michigan State of 0.5. And TCU picked up 2 decent out-of-conference wins in the regular season, defeating SMU and Virginia. Iowa State, rematch against Tulsa in the bowl game. They lose at 31-17, so the Big 12 takes a hit there. Tulsa, not a BCS team, so the 10-3 record has to be taken into consideration. It's not a 10-3 record out of the Big 12 or the Pac-12. Tulsa, a top 50 team, top 50 in the country. They beat Fresno State. They beat Central Florida twice. They lost to SMU and Arkansas, about the 12th best team in the SEC. So Tulsa wins at 31-17, dominance factor of 6. Iowa State did have 2 big wins in the regular season over Tulsa, interestingly enough, by 15, and they defeated Iowa by 3. One last bowl game in the Big 12, and this was a big one for the conference. Baylor Bears over UCLA. I really liked UCLA going into this game, but Baylor, too much speed on offense in particular, and the defensive backs just locked up UCLA. 49-26, big win for the Big 12. UCLA came in 9-4, competed very well with Stanford in the Pac-12 championship game, And of course, they had wins in the regular season against Nebraska, Arizona, and USC. Good wins, especially the Nebraska game. They lost to Stanford twice, no shame there. Lost to Oregon State as well, no shame, but they did lose in a big way. UCLA did to Cal. So UCLA, like a top 30 team, and Baylor wins at 49-26 in the regular season. Baylor's big non-conference win was over SMU 59-24. So this is how it stacks up for the Big 12 against the other 5 BCS conferences. Against the SEC, 1-1. Against the Big 10, 3-1. Against the ACC, they were 3-0. Against the Pac-12, the Big 12 went 2-2. Against the Big East, 0-1. And against the other top 25 competition, 0-2. So the Big 12 comes in at 9-7. Need to hear from you now on the Big 12 and our conference comparison here on Mark Rogers TV.